Hey, it's Adam Gower here, and in today's episode of the Real Estate Crowdfunding Show, Syndication in the Digital Age at GowerCrowd.com, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Kendall Krawchuk, who is Vice President of Marketing at Fund That Flip. Now, as you know, and as their name suggests, Fund That Flip provides loans to folk who are buying, renovating and selling single-family homes, which means that, like other platforms, including my own, they have to split their marketing in order to attract two distinct groups, borrowers and lenders, in other words, investors. To do this requires a very sophisticated approach to digital marketing for this kind of real estate syndication. And you're going to get a great treat today from Kendall, who is really a master of the field. Among the things I talk with her about are the trick to reading non-verbal clues online even when you can't see your prospect, dynamic response messaging, how to find your ideal investor, the one thing to do to get ahead of your competition, and, as usual, a lot more. Now, putting all these tricks and tips together, based on the kinds of best practices you're going to hear today from Kendall, requires the building of a pretty sophisticated system, as you can imagine. And the good news is that I've put together a workshop for you, so you can do this yourself. Just go to the show notes page for today's episode by going to GowerCrowd.com and navigating to the podcast section. There's a button there for this advanced training that you can access absolutely free. Plus, you can find more information about Kendall and some highlights about today's show, including a link to my conversation with Matt Rodak in an earlier podcast episode, who is founder and CEO of Fund That Flip. And that's all on the podcast page at GowerCrowd.com. So without further ado, here is Kendall Krawchuk, Vice President of Marketing at Fund That Flip. First of all, thank you so much for joining me. It's a real pleasure. I'm delighted to meet you. Kendall, why don't you start off by telling me something of your background? You have a very interesting background, right? As a multilingualist and all kinds of other things going on there. So tell me how, not only your background, but how you came to social media and digital marketing.
Sure. Yeah, Adam, I love the fact that you have come from a similar background that I have, and it's a little bit unusual. So I did come from an academic background, not pure marketing per se. So when I came into marketing, I really kind of cut my teeth on email marketing and social strategy for an open innovation company. They specialized in matching innovators, technical subject matter experts, partners needing technologies. So that was really how I got my start in marketing. And it was kind of a build myself from the ground up, because I had historically been in academia pursuing my PhD in Russian literature, of all things.
Right.
And I think you have somewhat of a similar background. We share
yes, an interest in obscure historical events.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And I always say that the pivot that I made to marketing really had to do with communicating with people. So my background as a linguist, and that as somebody that has studied communication and literature, which is at its heart communication with people, I made the pivot to doing marketing when I found that I was looking for something that was a little bit more applicable and pragmatic for daily life. So I made the transition. Yeah.
All right. So I was going to say then, so you were used to actually meeting with people and communicating with them in person, and you decided to migrate from that kind of teaching environment to one that was online. So tell me what appealed to you, and in what ways is it the same, and in what ways is it different?
Sure. Yeah. So the migration to online is interesting, right? So what appealed to me about digital marketing, and in particular what I started doing, which was email marketing, was the way that the tools that we use, digital tools like automation, marketing automation tools, email marketing tools, the way that it allowed us to track the effectiveness of how we were communicating with people. So I think the comparison in person, when you're communicating with someone, you can kind of see immediately within their body language or the way that they're responding to you, you get kind of an immediate reaction or data point on if you're communicating effectively, or, you know, if you're boring someone, or if you've really engaged them, right? You have that one-to-one kind of data point that you can immediately recognize. And what is so fascinating about digital is that oftentimes you're communicating with communities or customers or prospects that you might not necessarily have engaged with face to face. And what is cool about digital is that most of the tools that you're using have the built-in capability to actually look at that analytically. So for example, in email marketing, let's say you're really working to craft a fantastic subject line that you really know is going to engage with, let's say, a private real estate lender that you've really been tracking and really been trying to connect with. So if you've been using your email marketing automation tool, you can see very directly that whether or not they've opened the email or how many people that you've sent it to have opened it. So you have actually a digital analytical data point to point to. That is, you have the data behind it. You can see the numbers behind whether or not you have been able to connect with that person.
Right. Kendall, I think that's actually quite a brilliant insight, because one of the points that I make to real estate sponsors is don't be intimidated or concerned about moving into the digital world. Actually, there are some analogs that are very, very similar from the in-person world to the digital world. And you've really nailed it with that one. It's fascinating. So let's talk about that a little bit more, because let's actually back up a little bit and talk about actually what is email marketing. What is automated email, right? We know that we can send a blast via MailChimp, for example. But you're talking about something different, right? You're talking about if and scenarios. If somebody opens a file or watches a video, then they go into a different sequence, for example. So do you want to talk?
Sure.
Tell me a little bit more about how sophisticated email marketing can be and how you guys use it.
Sure. Yeah. Email marketing, it's a fantastic tool that I think everybody that is either just getting started or really has a robust digital strategy, it should be part of their core strategy. It's a fantastic tool that I think email is not dead. A lot of people say, you know, we've entered the death of email, even with the rise of social media kind of taking the forefront of digital. Email marketing is not dead. It's still primarily one of the ways, I think probably 90% of people are still communicating via email, right? Mm-hmm. So it's still that tactile one-to-one way of communicating with any stakeholder that you have, whether it's customers or prospects or other stakeholders that you might have in your network. So mm-hmm. The way that we use email marketing, we think of it as a tool as part of our marketing strategy. So let me back up a little bit and talk how we understand marketing, and then I think you'll see how we see email marketing fitting into kind of our overarching philosophy of marketing.
Perfect.
So to talk a little bit more to digital and to marketing. So I think it's important to kind of demystify the term digital marketing. Okay. Since I came to marketing with the different background than traditional marketing, this was always my understanding that marketing was happening online. So I think the way to think about it is that marketing is basic principles. It's all about knowing, understanding your customer and meeting them where they are, whether that's on social media, whether that's on a podcast, whether that's on email. It's all these different channels. Your website, for example, these are all digital marketing channels that should flow up to the core philosophy that you have, which is really understanding, engaging your network, customers, stakeholders, all of those people in your audience. So the basic principles really haven't changed, even though we've moved to having email and a lot of our business and even our social lives, our private lives, our politics are all online now. Mm-hmm. But business is online, but fundamentally the basic principles have not changed. So what does that mean? So I think, again, the way that we understand it here at Fund That Flip is that marketing should be all about meeting and understanding our customers. And as a core of that, a lot of our customers and our prospects are doing business via email, via social media. So what does that mean? So in particular, thinking about email marketing, and social media, basically we see these as a tool as part of our arsenal to communicate with them. So it can be like I said, it can be extremely effective in an intimate and an agile way of communicating with them, basically because you have that immediate indication of whether or not they've opened the email. I think I'm talking a little bit out, but anyway.
Right, you know that they can, well, like when they open an email, you can see that they have interacted with you. So presumably what that means is that you can create, for example, hot lists. You can identify people that are really engaged with your content. Is that's what you're headed towards, right?
Absolutely. So the behaviors that your audience is taking, for example, if they've visited your website, let's say you've got a website, you have a listing of the properties that you've recently finished. If the tools that are built in on your website, you're able to track and see the behaviors that your customers are taking online. And from that, you can start to automate what we like to think of as what we call nurture campaigns.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a big tool, part of email marketing.
So actually, let's connect those dots, because that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So somebody visits a site, our website, and they go to particular pages. They're going to be picking up pixels, right? To get really technical, they're going to pick up a little piece of code that we're able to track, so we can determine whether or not they've actually visited a particular page. So explain how then, what is the process then? And you can get as technical as you want, Kendall, feel free. So what is the process then for actually following up with somebody who has spent time on our website, and we know that they have an interest? So what comes next?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a specific example. So for Fund That Flip, let's say somebody has searched on Google, they're looking for hard money lenders, New York. Let's say our ad pops up, they see, oh, Fund That Flip, located in New York. They click on our ad, it takes them directly to the website, and they see a place for them to fill out an application for, let's say, a particular project they're working on in New York. So as they fill out this application, let's say that they mark their experience, they give us the project details, and they submit it. Okay, so that enters our system, which we call a CRM, which is a customer relationship management system. And we're able to, through a tool called lead scoring, assign them a level or a score based on the details that they've given us about them. So let's say there's a check mark for, we know they're interested, we know that they actively have a project that they're pursuing. Okay, let's say that this developer says that they have completed maybe 10 to 15 projects in the last year. Okay, so that gives us an indication of their experience level. For, let's say, as well as part of the application, they've also filled out the credit score. Okay, fantastic. Now we have these pieces of information. It starts to shape a profile of what this person is looking for and kind of their level of engagement with our site. So we might give them a score that indicates, yes, they're a hot lead. They have a certain level of experience that we are in particular looking for. Okay, check. They have a certain threshold of credit score that we are able to lend to as a direct lender. Check. Then we will push them into a workflow that is specifically tailored to those types of leads. So people that are. So will they get, for example, if they trigger a certain level of lead scoring, will they trigger an automated email? And if they're lower down in the lead score level, they'll get a different type of email. Is that how you've structured it? That's exactly right, Adam. Yeah, that you've nailed it. So the way that we separate this out, or that we kind of create these nurture campaigns, is all about the types of people and the profiles of people that are we're interacting with. So if they have a certain level of experience, in our particular example, we tend to work with people that have more experience. So we've developed what marketers call a user or a buyer persona around this type of ideal person.
Right.
And these indications, so a certain level of credit, a certain level of experience, and a certain location, these are kind of the key identifiers that make up what that customer profile looks like. Now, that's not to say that we ignore people that come to our site or are engaging with us on social media that might not have the experience that we're looking for. So there's a different type of profile that we have developed, a persona, which is someone that might be a newbie. So you've hit the nail on the head. We interact with these types of leads in different ways, these types of visitors to our website in different ways. So let me talk a little bit to the newbie. So again, as I mentioned, as a direct lender, we typically work with people that have a little bit more experience in real estate, but we want to provide value to people that have taken the time and are in the process of developing their real estate strategy, right? So let's say somebody comes to our site and they have no experience. They might have a project in mind. And they've indicated this all either through filling out a form, an application, or by let's say, interacting with certain types of content that we have pushed out on social media. So once we start to formulate the persona and once we start to kind of fill in the data points for that individual lead, if they fill that persona, we'll hit them with different types of content that's specifically tailored to them. So in the case of the newbie, we actually have developed a PDF, kind of an ebook, which is a first timer's guide to getting funding. And so that means that, and we'll do this in a variety of ways. So once we've identified that this person is a first timer, we'll send them out an email and saying, hey, thank you so much for engaging with our site or for sending us your application. We typically may not work with developers that are at your experience level, but here is this guide to getting your first deal funded. And so with that, we are able to kind of show them that we want to be a value add partner and keep our company at top of mind, even if we can't help them out at this stage in their customer journey.
That's really fascinating. So just to be clear that I get this. So when you send that out, that's not somebody in the office who is saying, oh, this person is, all right, let me send them an email. You've built systems. You've built these emails and pre-authored all these emails so that when somebody trips over a particular rating or a particular, whatever you want to call it, right? The lead score, they hit a certain level in that lead score, that your CRM, your email system automatically communicates with them. So at what point then do you actually proactively have a warm body contact, a prospect, or do you only wait for incoming? Is that how you structure it? Do you encourage people to contact you directly, or are you proactive in that regard?
It's a great point. It's a great point, Adam. You're right. So we've actually built on the back end within our CRM, we have built what we call automated workflows, wherein if they come across that trigger or that inflection point where they show that they match the profile of the newbie, then it will automatically send out an email, what we call a nurture campaign. So it's often a series of maybe 3 to 6 to 12 emails. And often it's not just all in one sequence, right? So the idea of nurture is that you nurture that lead over time, and you can do this all automatically and at a massive scalable level, right? So if it's a newbie Nick, let's say that's our persona, we often give him a name so that he's a little bit more.
And he's a guy, right? He's a guy in your case, right?
He's a guy.
Avatar is a guy.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. In the case of our ideal customer, the full-time Francine, I wanted to make her a woman. So
okay, good.
So yeah, exactly. So we will, on the back end, we're able to automate these marketing sequences, a variety, and like I said, it's multi-channel. So we could do email marketing, send out a couple emails, maybe over 6 to 12 months to newbie Nick.
Okay.
In addition to that, the tools are so advanced. It's so cool at this point. You can also take that contact information and upload them into a list wherein they are also marketed to across different channels. So bringing it back to social media,
Yep.
you can remarket to them on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. You're really able to take a multi-channel approach based on the strategy that you want to do with that type of persona.
Right. Isn't that incredible? And the flip is also possible. So somebody who clicks on your ad, for example, but doesn't complete the form in any way, shape, or form, right? You can remarket to them as well. You can identify who has interacted with your online ad and then send them more information, and presumably until they do respond. So how do you do that? Are you guys typically just Facebook or Google? I mean, you talked about LinkedIn. So do you advertise on all channels? And how do you decide which are the most effective?
It's a great question, Adam. And it's what's so cool about digital is like we talked about in the beginning a little bit, is that it's all trackable, and there's so much data to gather that you can really come into your strategy with a thesis and test it out. So for us, figuring out the social media channels that made the most sense was really a lot of trial and error, and starting with a thesis around who our customer was, or who were the people that we wanted to engage. So not just customers, but stakeholders, maybe, for example, people in PR or other types of stakeholders that would be interacting with your business. We really came to after some trial and error, we figured out that what made sense was to come to each social media channel with a thesis around, okay, who are the people that we believe are active on LinkedIn? Okay, do we think it's our borrowers? Do we think it's people that are passively investing in real estate? What are the quote unquote watering holes for each individual audience that we engage with as our business? So as I said, it was a lot of trial and error. So what we then did was we ran tests on each of these social media platforms. So for example, we would run a 4-week targeted marketing campaign messaging around one particular type of audience. So for example, I think on Facebook, we started off attempting to reach passive investors on there with a particular type of messaging. And we ran a test over 4 weeks, and we said, okay, this is how many clicks we would expect to get. This is how many leads we would expect to get from this campaign. And at the end of it, we found that, okay, so maybe we actually fell short of our goal. And so we decided that, okay, so maybe this isn't the right platform at this time for
that message and for that audience, right?
Exactly. And what's interesting is that if you run these tests simultaneously across platforms, you'll start to notice that maybe LinkedIn, you tend to get a particular type of customer or lead or prospect that engages with you, that you get more leads from, that you get more activity from on there. So,
hey, I've heard that LinkedIn is expensive relative to other platforms in terms of results. Have you found the same?
It's a great question. I think it's all about what goal you're trying to achieve. So if you're just looking at a cost per conversion, and if you're defining a conversion as converting a lead and getting a lead into your system, LinkedIn might be, you could probably argue that in real estate, LinkedIn leads are more expensive.
Okay.
On the other hand, if you're looking at simply trying to gather more followers to your LinkedIn profile, or get more clicks or more engagement with the types of content that you're pushing out on LinkedIn, you might find that it's actually not as expensive as campaigning on, for example, Facebook.
You know, that's an interesting tangent, actually, is the the idea that we might want to have that a sign of success is more engagement on social media sites or more followers. And, you know, I think typically, or previously, that was really true, wasn't it, Kendall? That if you had 10,000, you know, followers or connections on LinkedIn, when you put something out, they all saw it. Or on Facebook, right? Everybody would get your post in their feed. But that's all changed, hasn't it? It's much different now.
It absolutely is. I mean, we can talk about quantity versus quality, right?
Right.
I think that that's a really good kind of x-axis, y-axis way of looking at it. You might have a fantastic amount, a huge quantity of followers on, let's say, on, you know, the new, let's say if you're looking at creating a new strategy on Instagram, there are certain hacks that you can do, quote unquote, to garner, you know, just massive amounts of followers on there. However, if it's, you know, if you're not pushing out content, or if you're not pushing out the right messaging to the right people on there, it ultimately doesn't matter. It's not going to bring you more business if, you know, you're just pulling in hundreds and thousands of followers on there that might not necessarily be interested in your business.
Well, so then the other point is, of course, that, you know, you might have a lot of interaction, but the key is that what we're trying to do is, in your case, trying to both identify and solicit developers, right, so that you can lend to them of quality, but also try to find investors. So there's not much point if you get something that's just wonderfully what's it called, viral online, and you know, 100,000 people look at it, but then, you know, nobody signs a check or fills out a form. You know, what's the point? And we're in a very interesting business, right? That we're in this world of basically of finance online. So how do you deal with that as a, you know, it's not typically thought of as being a social play, right? Raising money online or making loans online. So how do you see that that nuance, if you like, with social media?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's super fascinating. And I think, so we look to one of our customers that we feel has really figured it out. I think there's, we have a particular customer that's local to us that has a fantastic presence on social media, on Instagram in particular. And the way that I think that they have cracked it is that they've identified the particular niche audience that they engage with their business. So for example, it's their end buyer. And that's the people that they truly target. That's where they spend their effort, their time, their resources in trying to attract on social media. They're not necessarily working on social media campaigns that would be geared toward their investors, but it's their end buyer. So they're looking at that segment of their business, and that's where they have focused their efforts. So in particular, their end buyer is often kind of a sort of the 30 to 35-year-old, maybe late 20s to mid 30s, first-time home buyer who's looking for a particular type of property, often a single-family residence that is located in an up-and-coming neighborhood. So that's the persona that they have crafted for their Instagram strategy. And so the way that they do that is they really are able to show progress on their projects and kind of show the details and show really kind of how much they specialize in this type of property. And for them, it's been really successful to see, you know, as their lender, they have a really fantastic historical record of what projects they've executed, kind of the demand and the built-in community that they have online that's already, you know, looking to buy their properties. So for us as their lender, it's really cool to see that they've tapped into one particular segment of their business, their end buyer, and they've really been able to activate them on social media.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. So they aren't directly, they're not messaging on social media directly to you. They're messaging to their end buyer, but
Mm.
that draws you in as well because it's a very compelling story that they're telling. And presumably their investors also are attracted to that. Would you agree with that? Like your investors on your platform, they also like that as well?
Absolutely. 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 That's something that we have definitely found from, in particular, our retail investors, the passive investors that come to the platform. They like to see that historical track record of execution. They like to see that these borrowers are sophisticated enough that they can gauge the level of demand in some of these up and coming neighborhoods. So it's really cool because we will often partner with our customers, our developers, in generating social media posts or blog posts, all types of content. We're working on some testimonials right now so that we can showcase, okay, to our investor side of the business, these are the types of sophisticated borrowers that we're working with. They've really cracked this market. You can see even, here's some hard evidence that that we can point to that is really a good case study that builds the trust and the transparency for the retail investors on our site.
Yeah, and you know what's particularly interesting about that is that inevitably there are other borrowers, there are other developers who have at least as good experience, possibly more, but the competitive edge that your case study has is that they are able to articulate that effectively on social media, and that's really what gives them the edge in the market, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I read a statistic once that marketing data, so that includes social media, email, all the things that we've been talking about, that data are used in decision making less than half the time in all businesses. And so for real estate, you know, as a real estate developer, you're already ahead of the pack and you already have a competitive advantage if you're starting to build out a presence on social media and running some of these theses and these A/B tests and really starting to outline a strategy for how you're communicating with all types of stakeholders for your business. That already gives you a huge differentiation and will push you ahead of the pack.
Yeah, it's really key. And the other thing that's nice about it, as soon as you put something up online, it actually becomes an asset to your company, right? And you build this corpus of information so that when people do come to see and find out who you are, you don't have to actively do anything, right? It's again, getting back to this very beginning of our conversation where we have been conditioned to meeting people in person, right? The real estate sponsor industry or real estate developer industry has been, you have to meet somebody, right? So if you're not actively meeting somebody, you're not raising money. Whereas if you have a sophisticated digital presence, as soon as you start putting stuff up, that's doing the work for you, right? I mean, it's right.
It's such a good point, Adam. You're right, because then you're really kind of doing double time with your efforts, right? If you're showcasing the progress on your projects, and if you're showcasing what your processes are in your business and you're able to push that out on social media, that already kind of gives you the footprint and the portfolio that you might need when you are actually going out and doing that active side of raising capital for future projects. So it kind of gives you the another competitive advantage because you're utilizing that time for another kind of for another benefit.
So let's talk for a couple minutes about the flip side to the business. And you're also in a world where you are trying to appeal to two different audiences, right? So you want to find developers or borrowers, but you're also out there trying to find investors. So let's talk about that side of it, right? So how do you, first of all, bifurcate that internally? Because I find I do the same, right? I have courses that I teach for investors, but I also provide digital marketing services to sponsors. So
Right.
I constantly battling with SEO. What should it be working with? And, I feel kind of schizophrenic in this way, right? Somehow. So
Yeah,
how do you guys manage that? And
absolutely.
what are the key drivers to bringing investors in, do you find?
Absolutely. It's a fantastic point. We can feel the schizophrenia as well and the bifurcation. And I think the best way that we have found to organize it is again, thinking about that segmentation of who our core ideal customer is. And so that's going to be different on the sponsor side versus the investor side. So we were talking before a little bit about the personas on the sponsor side. We've also developed personas on the lender side, on the passive investor side of the business. So that has been extremely helpful for being able to really articulate to whom we want to market. And it's taken some trial and error, because we found that we had a thesis that there was one particular type of passive investor that was kind of made up the entire profile of who our customers were. So what we did was we started with this thesis. Okay, we think it's this type of individual. They're of a certain level of income because they're an accredited investor. They're probably, oftentimes they're in higher paying, higher income jobs, like they might be doctors or lawyers that are looking to generate that passive income. So we started with the thesis around what that persona looked like. And then we actually started to go out and run tests. So that actually was, it was really fun. So we took a multivariate approach to running those tests. So one way was actually just going out and interviewing some of our core customers. It seems so obvious, right? Old style, yeah. Actually just calling them up.
It's a good start, right?
Yeah, it is. It's you think about who are the people that you want to attract more of, who are the people that you want more of doing business with you. And, if they're willing, and a lot of people are, and there's ways you can incentivize them as well, with a little bit of a yield bump or whatever. If you really get them to talk about their experience, they're totally happy to do so. Again, it goes back to real estate being driven by relationships. So just picking up the phone and talking with a passive investor that's been active on our site, that's a huge game changer, and it really gives you that qualitative kind of anecdotal data point. On the other hand, it's good to get the quantitative side of things, right? You want to be able to point to statistics and demographics of who your people are. So we actually, in addition to running personalized one-to-one interviews, we also sent out a survey to our entire passive investor customer base.
Okay.
So we asked them a question literally down to, what's your occupation? How did you hear about funds that flip? Where do you tend to get your, most of your investing information? We call that, again, the watering hole for that type of audience. And they're very willing to come back and say, this is how we heard about you. This is where we hang out. These are other crowdfunding platforms that we use. Here's why we like you. Here's why we don't. And that is just fantastic evergreen data that you can then start to distill and make really actionable business decisions out of. And so we ran that survey to our passive investor base, I think beginning of this year. And out of that, we've had 3 or 4 really large business initiatives come exactly out of that survey data.
Based on the results of the survey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, based on the results of the survey. And it was also cool to share internally, because people throughout the organization and throughout every experience level were able to see, okay, this is why we're taking this initiative, and we can see the data. Here we have the data to back up this business decision, and here's why we're doing this.
Right. And then presumably you also run the same kinds of tests on all different social platforms for investors in the same way as you do to find developers.
Exactly.
And do you find people cross over? Do people who want to invest will click on a borrow from fund that flip ad? Or, I mean, is there confusion sometimes between these things?
We do tend to see, so what's interesting is that, and I'll get a little bit technical here, based on some of the campaigns that we run, let's say it's geared toward our lenders, our passive investors. We are able to see some people that have clicked on an ad or have read an article that's part of the passive investor campaign, later then go on to submit an application for a project. So on the borrower developer side. Yeah. So we do see that a little bit, but I think how we mitigate that, and it's good that we eventually did convert that person. I think that the more tailored and the more precise that we get with our targeting and with our messaging, that way we can even be more efficient with these types of campaigns that we run.
Right. And your loyal customers on both sides of the equation anyway are probably going to read everything, right? No matter what it's about. They want to know everything about you. So whatever you've got out there is going to be
absolutely
right.
Absolutely. Our passive investors in particular, they're very fastidious, and they want to know everything about how we're communicating with our borrowers and how we, the types of borrowers that we attract. So I think it does make sense when we see some of our passive investors engage with our borrower content, they're doing their own due diligence, right? They're being an intelligent investor. They're seeing the types of people that we are, that we're lending to, the types of people that are our customers, because they are being passive investors in those loans, and they're taking part in those projects. So they're pretty sophisticated in that way. They want to do that due diligence.
Interesting. Yeah, they want to know what your standards are, and there's no better way to do that than looking at the borrowers.
Yep.
Kendall, I could definitely talk to you for a long time, and I know that we were almost going to touch on, I think you mentioned when we chatted offline, some things that you'd learned with your Russian studies. I don't know if you wanted to mention those, if you even remember what it was that you were thinking about. Do you? If not, that's totally fine. Do you remember?
I think it does all go back to remember who you're communicating with. In particular, when I was in Russia, I found that the type of Russian that I learned in the classroom in the US was very different from the language that was being used where I was, which was actually in Siberia. And it was, I was teaching English to 22-year-old Siberians. So the type of language that they were using was slightly different from the academic Russian that I learned in the classroom.
Wow, that's interesting.
So being able to pivot agilely enough that I could use the skills that I had learned in the classroom, and then apply it and kind of pick up on the nuances and tailor my messaging to the people that I was interacting with on a day-to-day basis, really enabled me to kind of think in my marketing position now, okay, what does this person want to hear? Because what are their needs? What are their challenges? What are their goals? What's their background, right? So it all comes back to thinking about the customer, thinking about the audience, thinking about them in that framework, and really tailoring your message to who that person is.
All right, so I'm going to have to crack a joke and then ask a small favor of you before we do 3 sign-off questions. So,
great.
So if there's any Americans listening, switch off now and don't take offense. But what do you call somebody who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual, right? What do you call somebody that speaks 2 languages? Bilingual.
European. Bilingual, yeah.
What do you call someone that speaks only 1 language? American. Sorry, everyone. You can turn back on now. All right.
No offense to Americans, yeah.
You've got to say something in Russian. Say, hello, nice to meet you. Or something like that, like your standard greeting.
Добрый день. Очень приятно.
Wow, very nice. I'm going to clip that and practice later.
It's a good one. I could teach you some other stuff that my Siberian students taught me, but not on this podcast.
Right? Exactly. All right. So let me ask you 3 sign-off questions, quick one-liners, or however long you want to answer. It's totally fine. I ask all my guests the same 3 questions, and they go as follows. So what's for somebody starting out thinking about developers and sponsors, right? Real estate developers who want to syndicate their deals. What's the most important thing, do you think, somebody starting out syndicating real estate online should keep in mind?
That's a good one. I would say for that one, don't be tempted to fall in love with your own business as you're starting out. Again, think about who your customer is. If it's the investors you want to attract to your projects, think about them and what will be useful for them, and then start to develop your messaging, your content, the articles that you're writing, the things that you're putting out on social media. Then start to form that around what your customer wants to hear.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? You've got to provide value, and value is not talking about how fabulous you are. Right?
Not necessarily. Sometimes it is. Yeah.
That's my favorite subject, but I try and keep away from it as much. All right. So all right. Second question: what has been the hardest lesson that you've learned personally? The hardest lesson online?
Yeah, I would say that trust is hard to build. This is an old cliche, but trust is hard to build, and it's very easily lost. And that's very true in the age of digital marketing and being online. You have to be very careful in the messaging that you're pushing out, and also how you're responding to people that are on your social media platforms, because one bad review or even one good review, it can tip the balance either way. So I would say always be listening to people that are talking to you on social media. If they're leaving Facebook reviews or if they're messaging you on there, always listen to them and respond to them.
Oh gosh, you've got me really paranoid now.
It's also a good thing too, because we've actually sourced some of our best leads from Facebook. So yeah,
incredible. Yeah, I have this Instagram thing going, and I'm just a bit slack with it. You've got to use your phone. I've got no idea.
Yeah, you got to automate it. You got to automate it, Adam.
Need automation, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So my last question: what are your key daily habits? What do you think are key daily habits you should have to be successful online?
That's a really good one. This one I read once in a book from a former mentor. Her name's Amy Radin, and I thought it was fantastic advice. And it's really hard to follow, but I've been trying to do it. She had the example of, she tries to read every single email that comes into her inbox, because even if she sources one good idea out of the thousands that come into her inbox, it's worth the time that she invested reading every single email. So I've been trying to do that. I haven't really been succeeding, but it's always kind of my top of mind daily as I settle in and start to read my email. I keep that top of mind.
Oh, perfect. You are the perfect target then for just about every marketer.
Yeah, it's true. I'm a cliche.
All right. Well, Kendall, it's just a huge pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Maybe you would be kind enough to sign off again in Russian, if you wouldn't mind.
All right, Adam. What a pleasure. Thank you so much. Очень спасибо большое. Мне было очень приятно. Вот и все. До свидания.
Oh, that's just fantastic. Thanks so much.
Not too bad. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. What a pleasure. This was so fun.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
That was Kendall Krawchuk, Vice President of Marketing at Fund That Flip. She knows her stuff. And if you want to implement any of the ideas she talked about today, go to the podcast page at GowerCrowd.com, where you can find a selection of the highlights in easy-to-watch video shorts, as well as advanced training, so you can build the investor acquisition system yourself. And by the way, you can also find all the video highlights of today's podcast on my YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and search for GowerCrowd, where you'll also find a link to the free training. All right, that's it for now. Thanks so much for listening, and thank you, Kendall Krawchuk, Vice President of Marketing at Fund That Flip. I wish I could speak English as nice as what you done speaking Russian. That's it. I'll see you all next time, and for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off.